Edition of Charlie Rose.
Pablo Picasso dominated Western art in the 20th century. He moved through a number of stylistic periods, constantly reinventing the definition of art. His phases of creative activity range from his early days in Barcelona to his blue and rose periods to Cubism and Neoclassicism. It has been said that he painted each of his works as if he was trying to discover the art of painting all over again. Throughout all of his work runs one common theme, that of sexuality and eroticism. Inspired by the women in his life, Picasso explored sex and sensuality throughout his entire career, right up until his death in 1973. Françoise Gillot was with Picasso for 10 years. She spoke to me about the artist in 1998.
Picasso needed poets as well, maybe even more poets than to interact with poets as much as to interact with other painters. I think it's a stimulation.
Picasso once said, art is not chaste, or if it is chaste, it is not art. For the first time ever, the largest and most comprehensive display of erotic works by Picasso is on display. Picasso Erotic, currently on view in Canada at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, originated in Paris and will continue on to Barcelona. The exhibition in Montreal is the exclusive North American venue. Due to the graphic nature of much of the works, it includes many pieces that have never before been seen. Tonight I am joined on location in Montreal by Guy Cogeval, the director of the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Later, Jean-Jacques Lebel. He is the man responsible for bringing this collection together. I remind you that due to the nature of the exhibition, some viewers may wish to use discretion. Tell me about this exhibition and how it came into being.
When I was first appointed 3 years ago from Paris to Montreal, Jean-Jacques Lebel, who is an artist and a close friend of mine, immediately came to tell me I should propose you a big project, yeah, and it could be Picasso Erotic. And I said, mon Dieu, hasn't it been already done in the past? And he said, no, there has been a small exhibition in the Musée Picasso in Barcelona 25 years ago with 16 pages for a catalogue, but not a sum on this idea. And it's really a red thread in
the life of Picasso.
Yes, in the oeuvre of the master.
In the body of work, yeah.
And I said, okay, so I will tell the board of trustees, I'll see if it will not be a bumpy session, and it hasn't been.
And they had no reservations about it?
Absolutely not.
You said, I'm doing Picasso and sex, Picasso and erotica.
No, I said from the beginning in French, Picasso Erotic, because it refers to the 18th century, I hope. So.
But no one said, is it too raunchy, is it too...
No.
Nothing.
And there was no protest in the Tour de Table, yeah, and they were very happy with the idea of doing it. But now they are much happier because the success in Paris was overwhelming.
Yeah, and the success here is even larger in terms of the numbers of people.
Yes. Because most of the persons who heard about the project thought it could be an exposition dossier, a small exhibition with works on paper. And in fact, it's a very large exhibition.
350 works,
yeah,
of which half have not been seen before.
And many haven't been seen before, and certainly not put in that kind of context.
Yeah.
Even if a Picasso worshippers would go to Barcelona, Stockholm, etc., they could see a large part of them. But there are still 50 works that are that have never been on show before.
Not because they were in private collections in all cases, in some cases in museums where they kept them in storage.
Yes, because you must say, if you don't raise that project, and with such a title, some of the works are difficult to show among other Picasso or among 20th century collection. And I cannot blame my colleagues who keep them in storage. But sometimes they could show it, because we are adults after all.
Yeah, absolutely, we hope so. So why no exhibition? This is the only exhibition in North America.
Yes.
No exhibition in Latin America, no exhibition in the United States.
You know, when you organize an exhibition, you don't press a button and say, I want to do that next year and the year after. It's a very long process, and I know the director of the Musée Picasso in Paris very well. We already did together major exhibitions like Paradis Perdu, Lost Paradise, we did here 5 years ago. So he's a very close friend of mine, and that made the exhibition possible in Montreal. Because in fact, we are not a major Picasso museum. And
it's not an area of particular interest for you.
It is a great interest for me, but I am not a specialist of Picasso, of course.
Oh. So why no exhibition in the United States?
Because at first, we were supposed to do it in two venues, just Paris, Musée Picasso, and Montreal. And then the Musée Picasso Museo Picasso in Barcelona added itself, and it makes sense because they lent us 25 works on paper, major ones, the first ones in the first rooms on Picasso's youth. And then it's a very interesting tour, and we knew we would be the only ones. But with such an amount of works on paper, 200 works on paper, you cannot travel an exhibition for 4 or 5 venues. It's impossible. We are just at the limit of what the rules of loans between museums can accept.
Most
yes.
exhibitions. I promise you, if it was Picasso's portraiture, it would have found a home. The answer is, and you're being generous to your fellow directors.
I want to be diplomatic.
Yes, you're being. And so you are.
Yes.
And so you are. And the idea is that Americans are too puritanical, too scared of that streak in America.
I must say it wouldn't have been that easy to do in any museum in Europe, maybe, and certainly there is a wave of conservatism, maybe in Northern America, that hasn't touched Montreal yet. So I took the opportunity to propose the exhibition. But I was surprised to see that even with the elderly people, some are rather conservative politically. There was no problem at all, and they are very, very proud to have this exhibit, because it's a serious exhibition that deals sometimes with death, with longing, with romanticism. There are all these aspects. We did that exhibition because we wanted to show beautiful pieces by Picasso, and
that go from the time he was a young man till his death.
Exactly, because he has a volcanic personality.
And a long-time interest in the human form and sexuality as well.
Exactly.
What's the significance of this exhibition?
Frankly, I had no hidden motives to do that kind of exhibition. I admire Picasso very much. I was sure that the combination of the persons who wrote in the catalogue, Robert Rosenblum, for instance, would make a big book and a big project. And I generally prefer in my museum to show beautiful objects, and it's as simple as that. And the significance is that we show a large part of Picasso's work, excluding, for instance, the Cubist period. Of course, when he works with Braque and he does stuck papier collé, it's not quite erotic. In his neoclassical period, there are rather few examples of the neoclassical period, which personally I prefer to all others, because there are few eroticas in that period. But you have the Barcelona period, which is overrepresented, and the 30s, the period in which he meets Marie-Thérèse. He has a great success with the galleries. He has become the greatest painter in France and soon in the world. And he's attracted by surrealism, where he never was part of the surrealist group, of course, he couldn't have, but he was attracted by
some of the ideas that were there as part of the time in Paris.
And
what did you learn as a director about Picasso?
That he cannot be compared to any other artist. Although I am much more specialist of Vuillard, Bonnard, which I love more, but he's the greatest artist of the century, because you cannot stop him. You cannot reduce him to a period or a style. He's always reinventing. You have the impression that at certain moments Picasso is dead. When he was Stalinist and he did massacres in Korea, it's really, sometimes you feel embarrassed in front of those paintings. But suddenly after that, he invents a new style, he finds something.
Some say he invents a new style because he met a new woman.
Certainly, the succession of styles is linked to the women with whom he lived. For instance, he would never have met Cocteau, Diaghilev, and worked for the Ballet Russe if he hadn't met Olga.
Right.
Olga Koklova.
Yes.
And he was not influenced by Olga Koklova. She couldn't have influenced him. But it was a period during which he was more, he felt freer to give and to show his respect for Ingres, Raphael, and the big tradition of drawing, perfect drawing.
But you can see how Picasso feels about the women, and we're identifying women and sexuality because it was so central to his being. His being.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can see it in the way he paints the women. The beginning of the relationship looks this way, the end of the relationship looks this way. Yes?
Yes, with...
And even in these exhibitions, when you're talking about sexual overlays.
Yes, it's absolutely true, but he transforms his sexual needs and his sexual longings in objects of art, and that is the big lesson that I learned in this exhibition.
Which is
the fact that he can transform most of his inner tendencies and longings in objects, with a sort of distance, with Einsight, and that is the mark of a great artist.
Picasso, I think, once said, "You may lose the capacity to engage in sex, but you never lose the desire."
And certainly the other lesson of the exhibition is that sometimes some artists never lose the capacity to turn to sexuality and eroticism. Yeah. And
he was always a voyeur.
Yes, but I would say I come from France. The voyeurism is a part of sexuality. You do not wait for being old to, and art has to do with voyeurism too.
Yeah. Because you are in fact looking inside of someone's privacy, their mind, their heart, their soul, their
and you try
being.
To enter the logic of an artist. And the satisfaction of the work of art has to do, the delectation of the work of art has to do with voyeurism.
Voyeurism is about exposure, and so is art.
Voilà, that's right.
This exhibition runs here through September.
Until the 16th of September, and unfortunately I cannot add one day, so I would have loved. And then it goes to Barcelona, but in a reduced version.
What makes you happiest about having it here at your museum?
To have worked with Jean-Jacques Lebel and to have read the texts because I'm very proud of the catalog. So one of the best aspects of the production. And in a room like the one in which we are, with the major paintings of the end of the 20s and the 30s, and the intermingling of the sculptures, I'm very happy to show that to the public.
Thank you for allowing us to come here.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
We will now talk to Jean-Jacques Lebel and find out from him how this has been a lifelong passion.
Yes. Bonne chance.
We'll be right back. We're at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Picasso Erotica. Back in a moment. You're the guy responsible for this.
I guess so.
How did it happen?
It's an old dream, adolescent dream, meeting Picasso back in '66.
Because you went to see him for what reason?
To try and get the rights to his play, Desire Caught by the Tail, which was written in '41 during the Nazi occupation and read in public under the direction of Albert Camus with Sartre and Léris, Simone de Beauvoir and all, in '44. And Léris told me, I was doing happenings in those days, and Léris was kidding me, you know. I was a young artist, saying, "Wow, you guys didn't invent much. Picasso did this before." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, read this." And I read the text of the play, and believe it or not, it was a work of Dada genius, not surrealist, Dada genius. And I said, "Wow, why hasn't this been played?" Well, he said, "You know, it's impossible. It's too complex, too crazy, too wonderful." And I said to him, "Would you please ask Picasso for the rights of this?" And Picasso actually told me to come down and see him with Léris, which I did. And we got involved in conversations about art and poetry and how he was writing a lot. I didn't know that. His writings were not published in those days. And not only did he give me the rights, but for free. You know, he signed a piece of paper saying, you know, that was his way of helping young artists. And that's a great lesson for today, you know, like you know, transmitting helpful, wonderful friendliness from one generation to another.
But did he show you some art at that time?
And he certainly did. And I said, "But this is fire. This is incredible volcanic stuff." And he said, "Well, you know, I did a lot of this. Here, look at this." And he opened a locked door in the back. And dealers and newspaper people were waiting in the other room, you know, for several hours. And he said, locked the door of one and unlocked another one and brought out some of the drawings that are in this show. I couldn't believe my eyes, you know, because this stuff had never been shown nor published anywhere. And so I asked him, "Why the hell haven't you put these things in exhibitions?" He says, "You're still a young man. You don't know anything about museums and institutions. They don't show the most important things, you know." I said, "What do you mean?" You know. So that was 1966, and here we're in 2001, and we proved that it could be done.
Why wasn't it done earlier? I mean, this seems to be, to know Picasso is to know, or at least to assume, the centrality
of erotic vision
and erotic vision.
That's a very fundamental question. It's addressed to Picasso as a human being, to his strategy in life, what to show, what not to show. But it's also addressed to the major institutions, the museums of the world. Why don't they show what is most important? So you can answer it as well as I can. Why does it take a person like Guy Cogeval here in this museum to understand immediately, but I mean in 10 seconds, the importance of a project such as this? I mean, any museum could have done this 30, 40 years ago. Why didn't they do it? Why did it take another artist? It doesn't matter whoever it was, you know. Why did it take another artist to understand that this is fundamental? Well, because probably they're scared that their sponsors won't sponsor, that the friends of the museum won't give the millions of dollars, et cetera, et cetera.
It'll kick up controversy.
That's wrong, because here they were delighted, you see.
What's important about this exhibition?
Perhaps that the intuition that any human being feels, looking at a Picasso of any period, of any subject, is that his onlook, the point of view is that of Eros. It's as if Eros was inside of him, looking at him painting. You know, the transmutation between the artist and the model, the permutation of Degas, how Picasso identifies with Degas, and yet shows us Degas from the outside.
Okay, but take Degas, I mean, Degas and others. Who have reflected sexuality and eros in their work. Picasso was different?
Yes, in that he prepares a place for you and I, the beholders, in the work itself. A bit like Giorgione or Velázquez did, you know. He includes us as viewers. You know what Marcel Duchamp says, that it's the beholders who make the art, you know, and that beautiful masterpiece in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Étant Donné. And to the point of view that's also present in Picasso. Already in the Barcelona days, he's including the viewer, not the voyeur, the viewer, in the composition itself.
And the Barcelona days are when he is a very young man.
Yeah, an adolescent. And already the problems, the metaphysical and aesthetic problems of his maturity are already present in the early days. As all geniuses, he was a teenage genius. And he was a teenage genius at 91 when he died.
He was so good that his father stopped painting.
Yeah.
Saying, if you can do this at that age,
right.
Why am I painting?
And he was boasting that he was drawing like Raphael, but the boast was true.
How do you explain this?
Very complex. Yeah.
How do you explain this kind of genius?
Well, earlier we were talking about the boredom of doing one thing always. And Picasso was very aware of that also. And, he was a great poet. Yeah. Not only a great playwright, but a great poet. His complete works were published by Gallimard, are very thick. He was a great engraver, a great teacher. He was several people at the same time, not only in several periods of his life, but simultaneously he was several people. Isn't that the mark of greatness?
Yes. Why is it art?
It's art because it obliges us to rethink who we are while we're looking at it. And it's a philosophical statement on what human desire is all about. It's not a question of object and subject. It's not a question of female or male. It's a question that we are all these things at the same time. And it has to do with painting the invisible parts of desire, the invisible components of desire. Painting is not only painting what you have in front of your eyes, it's painting what you dream of. And I think that Picasso had the courage to paint.
His fantasy and everything else.
Yeah.
But doesn't sexuality lead you to eroticism? Or
sometimes yes, sometimes no. The difference between art and sexuality is that the erotic feeling is there to be conveyed and transmitted to other people. Where sexuality is something that you live or don't live, it's a private thing. But eroticism is something that transforms your human experience into an art form, into painting or poetry or cinema or whatever. I don't think that this sexuality comes from only experience. It comes from things that you want to live but have not yet lived or perhaps will never live. That's the difference between eroticism and sexuality. It has to do with the invisible, not only the visible part of human desire.
It just seems amazing to me to think that half of the works on display here have not been seen before.
Yeah.
They've been either locked up by a museum, in a private collection
Several
somewhere.
museums.
Several museums.
Yes.
Private collection somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, was it because the museums thought they were second-class work, or was it because of something else?
Now that's just a diplomatic excuse, very hypocritical excuse. You know, they were caught red-handed by, you're talking about a great museum in the United States, it was caught red-handed by Robert Rosenblum, who asked that museum why it wasn't showing this 1903 oil self-portrait. Because children come to the museum. But that's no excuse. What about, well, we're not sure about the importance of it, that work historically. We're sure enough to show it, you see. Another thing is that art historians, scholars, usually want to keep all this stuff for themselves, you see. What we're doing here is letting it all hang out. For instance, the notebooks that are so important. We filmed every leaf of those notebooks and just showed them to the public. Usually they only see the first page.
Because you can't leaf through them.
You can't, of course, you can't touch them, but you can film them. Mm-hmm. So that accounts for the 40 or 45% of works here that have never been seen by the public before. Our idea is to allow the non-elite, average public to understand the inner workings of this man's mind, and they're very complex. How he would continue working day and night and move around the subject and then sculpt with his drawings, and all these drawings are shown here.
You have here 3 distinct periods.
At least, yes.
Well,
yeah,
basic 3.
Yeah.
Youth,
maturity,
middle age, and death. The
right.
end.
Yeah.
And what you suggest, what's the difference? How does he Give me a sense of why why there?
I would say that in the first years, he was trying to, he didn't go to the university. He went to brothels. Right. The brothels were his university.
His education was
and he was learning about human desire and painting at the same time. So the brothel was his classroom in a way.
So therefore, looking at the specifics, we have here in this exhibition, out of your mind, a brothel.
Oh, definitely.
First thing you see.
Yeah, the installation, yes. Yeah. It's an homage to Picasso in the eyes of Duchamp.
Marcel Duchamp?
Yes, of course. It's a tongue-in-cheek, but my tongue in your cheek, concerning Étant Donné, which is in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But, so there's a room, a brothel room, which is very carefully and very scholarly quoting from the works of Picasso around in the second part of the show.
But there's a movie running.
There's a movie running, and the movie was shot not in Barcelona, but in Valencia, which is a few hundred kilometers away in those years, in a brothel. And the producer was the king, Alphonse XIII, who was a very frequent visitor to brothels, almost as frequent as Picasso. Anyway, that classroom where he understood what life was all about, including the melancholy side of desire, of human desire, and including special relationships with certain models, evolved after the Surrealist period, after the Neoclassical period, into a much more intimate evaluation of the place. You see, he puts himself in the work of art, either pretending he's Degas, or pretending he's the Pope, or pretending he's Raphael, copulating with an imaginary lady who could be Mrs. Picasso, by the way. You never know. Anyway, he is in the image several times in different guises.
Yeah, but the fact is that Picasso did not use his wives and lovers as models, did he? He took from memory his depiction of them.
I wouldn't swear that it was always the case. It was sometimes the case. You know, you never can tell with a guy like him. He's always, he puts himself in the guise of a clown and a bouffon. Not only the Pope, not only the king, but also a bouffon. So you never know what trick he's pulling on you. The permutation, may I outline this, that the permutation between the artist and the model is extremely important. They change places, they change roles. You never know which one is representing Picasso exactly.
As you know, some people have always been offended, especially some women, by Picasso's work because they say it's misogynist.
Well, that's a very shallow point of view, I would say. It's also an extraordinary glorification of womanhood.
Yeah, but they also say there are depictions of bestiality and there are depictions of
well, if you don't like animals and bestiality, I think you have to empty out most of the museums in the world.
And pictures of domination, and there are pictures of always aggression, phallus aggression.
What about Shakespeare? You want to censor Shakespeare?
Well, I'm not talking about Shakespeare. I'm talking about Picasso.
No, but I'm saying, it makes me laugh. What can I say?
But
what about the
corrida? Am I the first person to ever tell you this?
No. I usually laugh
when you hear that.
Yeah. Because it's such a childish, shallow point of view on what art is supposed to be. It's a point of view of political correctness. And if I think that Picasso is carrying the red and black flag of political incorrectness very high above all this measly political stuff.
Saying it matters not.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's Mayor Giuliani trying to tell artists what they should paint or not paint, or Senator Helms, or I don't know what committee of political correctness. I think that artists should just do this to them, And that's what Picasso is doing.
Yeah.
And having a good time doing it too. Which helps.
Sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
You've wanted to do this for a while.
Yeah.
It's been lurking there in the recesses.
Yes.
Yes. And in a sense, do you say today, as you said to me earlier, or do you say now, as you said to me 30 minutes ago, that it couldn't have been done earlier, that somehow...
Probably not. Probably not.
Everything has its time.
Yes. Also, the fact that because of the world wave of political correctness and this terrible conservative, castrating point of view that tends to be dominating in many great institutions in the world, this is a philosophical statement what we're making here.
Which is what?
Which is not only that if art is chaste, it is not art. It's also that if art is not free, it is not art. You see, we in Europe have been submitted to terrible amounts of censorship during the periods of the Nazi occupation, right, and then the Stalinist very dark times. And these points of view that the state and the governments or whatever, or the market should tell the artist what to paint or what not to paint, is absolutely insufferable. And we're saying, and Picasso is saying, hands off art. And so it's a sort of hymn to the joy of complete freedom here in this show. I hope it's clear.
That's one thing. What else is clear out of this show?
That art is subconscious. You know, that you asked me earlier, how could I explain Picasso's sexuality? Certainly not. Right. I don't know what I would want to, but I couldn't explain anything, you know, in that way. I don't think that art explains. It unveils.
It helps you come to your own conclusions.
It helps you visit your own life in a different way. Yes.
Does it say anything about how he felt about women?
Desire, how he felt about desire. Women, I'm not sure, because what kind of women? No, the women that he lived with, or the women that he dreamt of.
Both. I'm not sure they're always disconnected either.
Okay, Venus, the imaginary goddess of love. Yes, certainly. He says a lot about that. He says about the fact that it kept death away from him. You know, human desire, his own desire, and the desire of ladies that were so important in his life.
Kept death away from him?
Yes, it was a sort of shield against death. And that's why the drawings and the paintings of the last period are so important. You know, that Picasso probably would have liked this show to have been produced during his lifetime. Only once were these images shown during his lifetime. In Avignon in 1970, and during the Avignon Festival, in the Palace of Popes, by the way.
Right. How many of them, though?
The entire Degas series, and I think most of the Fornarina and Raphael series. You know that the critics bombed the show?
Because?
They said, he's gaga, how can this old man paint this horrible, dirty things? This was in 1970, so you can imagine.
We're going to talk about the Raphael, but since you mentioned it now, what's it about?
It's about being in the image and outside of the image at the same time. It's about the curtain. You know, the curtain's a very important accessory in Picasso. And the Demoiselles d'Avignon, they're a curtain. Yeah. And it has to do with theater. You know, he's a great theater decor artist also. So it's in the brothels or the theater or the museum, there's a curtain behind which the artist is hiding. And the artist is watching from behind the curtains. And what is he watching? He's watching another artist, Raphael, and the Fornarina, the famous portrait of Raphael and the Fornarina. He's imagining what's happening in the sequence after that. Of course, he's never gave up his palette and his brush. Right. But he's fornicating with the Fornarina. It's interesting, Fornarina, fornication. It's a play on words. He's always doing that kind of stuff, poetic play on words. And then he's imagining that this young artist is him. You know, he said that when he was 17, he could draw like Raphael. Well, maybe when he was 85, he could still fornicate like Raphael. I mean, he's playing. The sense of humor is the key to everything.
What was the greatest satisfaction, pleasure in putting this together?
Of seeing the consistent evolution of his gaze from these very early adolescent works to the last drawings he ever did when he was 91 years old, a few months before he died. It was a hypothesis, you see. This has never been done before. So we weren't sure that we had really something great. You know, that's the interesting risk of putting together an enormous exhibition like this.
You were not sure that hanging an exhibition on the basis of erotica was a sufficient, serious...
It was, of course. I was sure of that part, but I wasn't sure of the greatness of the works.
That it had enough of the individual works.
Yes, and that to put them in sequence like we have them here, chronological and thematic, I wasn't sure, because you know, when you do things like this on the floor, when you're preparing a show with photocopies or photos, it's theoretic. It's a theory. It's a vision.
Right.
Well, here we have the real thing, and it surpasses anything we could have dreamt. In that sense, that the intensity and the beauty and the overwhelming. I've seen this show now 7 or 8 times coming back to Montreal, and every time I'm shocked, like by an electrical shock, at the way he circumvented the dominant morals of his times, all the periods that these things were created in, and said the unsayable and showed the invisible of human desire. You know, when you think of Spain, you think of the corrida, you think of the bestiality and the blood and the guts, but don't forget the mystical side. You know, the Catholic crucifying side, the drama, the religious part of, you know, don't forget the Doramar, who a very important woman in his life, a great photographer and a very important lady, was very close to Georges Bataille, the philosopher, before meeting Picasso. And, you know, in the surrealist
meetings they would have.
Yes, and in the atmosphere of Paris in those days, revolutionary politics and the philosophy which came from the Marquis de Sade were extremely vividly, intensely present in the writings, in the theories, and in the work. I'm sure you've read the book by Françoise Gillot on her life with Picasso.
Yes.
There's a very interesting little note in that book. She's visiting Picasso for the first time, and he's taking her through his studio and trying to get her towards the bedroom. And in between the studio and the bedroom, there's a large room full of books everywhere. And as by chance, negligently set on a chair in the passageway, the complete works of the Marquis de Sade. And he looks at her...
Hoping to provoke?
Yes, he looks at her with his, you know, his Spanish burning eyes and says, I'm sure you're familiar with the Marquis de Sade. And she says, well, not really. Well, she became certainly very familiar in the years after that.
All right. Tell me about these paintings, these drawings, these parts of this exhibition, the embrace at the beginning.
Very interesting small drawing in which the hand of the lady sort of envelops the man like a snake. And look at his paw. His paw is like a football mitt. You know, it's very, it's not yet a great artist, but it's, that's drawing, but it's a great artist who is seeing what happens to the couple. Look at their faces. They've been erased. No more faces, no more mouths.
A few more here. One, self-portrait with the artist or scene erotic. The one that the Metropolitan Museum of Art had.
Yeah, they acquired it. It was given to them, by the way. They didn't buy it. It was given to them.
By?
A man called Thayer. And it's an interesting thing that in the contract they were supposed to show it. So they need an excuse not to show it, so they say it's not a good work of art. Anyway, it's very important for us to show those 3 self-portraits from 1902, 1903. Notice that in that painting, that oil painting, he's looking at you and me. He's looking at us. He's aware already that we are there as viewers looking onto the scene. He's not looking at the lady. He's not looking at the ceiling. He's looking straight at us. You know, like in the Velázquez Meninas already. He's staring at us. There's an interchange between the viewer and the artist already in the young man. It's pretty good. À la toilette. Is she looking into the mirror, or is he allowing us to peek into an intimate scene that we're not supposed to be looking at, you see? In that painting, which is a neoclassical painting, we are excluded. We are turned into voyeurs, if you will. It's interesting that you could define Picasso's work as, does it include or exclude the voyeur? And in that particular painting, we're not supposed to be watching.
All right. Finally, there is the harem.
The harem, well, notice that it's a eunuch.
Yeah.
He's sitting on the floor, he's defeated.
Right.
His manlyhood is certainly disappeared.
Right.
And these ladies are making fun of him. And he's very fat. And it's the pink period. And he's trying to enter the world of Ingres, one of his great masters. He's trying to understand the point of view of this eunuch who is there, who can't touch the ladies, and who is surrounded by beautiful presences, very erotic presences, but he just lays there like a hippopotamus on the floor, defeated hippopotamus.
So we then shift gears a little bit. So from these early years, starting with the brothel, starting with the donkeys, all that part of a very, very young Picasso.
Right.
He goes
Teenager.
to Paris.
Yep. Yep.
And then he goes through Cubism and other things. And then you get to the war years, in between the war. And this is the middle part of this exhibition.
The 30s.
What's the transition?
The transition is that probably out of the neoclassical period, you see, he's forever going from one extreme to another, like the pendulum, you know? From Cubism, he goes into neoclassicism, and then he gets bored with that after a while and goes into surrealism, the 30s. And he reinvents new forms always in each period. And in the 30s period, you have several examples of how he's trying to disembody the erotic characters that are copulating in front of him. And each time he completely sculpts and invents new forms. In this particular period, in the 30s, I'm sure that you'll see that Archibald Gorky has really examined these things carefully, because you'll find themes in Gorky's work in 10 or 15 years later.
I want to ask about some specifics here. The Kiss from 1925 here.
Yeah.
Not a tender kiss.
No, it's a very violent one, and it has to do with probably, if you want to be biographical about it, is a very stormy relationship with Olga.
He's tiring of her. He wants to go.
They were arguing most of the time. They were in a dramatic sort of soap opera. That's why he needed to transcend the pain of that relationship into quite bestial representations.
Then comes 1928 and The Bathers.
Yeah. The Bathers, that's the beginning of his relationship with Marie-Thérèse. You know that she was a swimmer, she was an athlete, and it has to do with the sea. And also the way that everything is round, everything is circular, everything is like, you might say, that breasts are present, ever present, omnipresent everywhere.
Someone once said to me that they thought he loved her most.
You're never sure with Picasso. He was certainly fascinated.
them almost.
He was very fascinated by her youth, by her sense of humor, by the fact that she was not that interested in art. She was just a lively, extremely electric presence in his life. And he was fascinated by her, and he began to study the roundness of the female form and explore it to the hilt, thanks to her.
Head of a woman, bronze sculpture.
Well, it's a head, it's a portrait, and yet it's her entire body. Look at the nose, look at the eyes. The eyes are breasts, the nose is another part of, not very female, of that, her anatomy. And just turn around it, and you'll see her hair is outlined, you know, like by a pencil in the bronze. And that's the beginning of the great Picasso, where he says somewhere, why not put the sexual organs in the mouth, and why not put the eyes between the legs? In other words, his experiencing that absolute freedom of reinventing anatomy. And Marie-Thérèse, certainly, because of her very athletic presence on the beach, you know, always jumping around, swinging around, and being free with her body, certainly influenced him in a very, very strong, powerful way, I would say.
The Kiss, 1931.
In The Kiss, the two partners, you might say, are already enemies. It's the carnivorous element of love.
And now we come to Dora Maar, the recumbent woman, and then...
Yes, she was a mystic. She was looking always beyond the horizon. And you know, there's this famous drawing in which he makes a play on words on her name, Adora, like in English or in French. Adorable Dora. Her real name was Theodora, by the way. She was spent the last period of her life very near to the Catholic Church, and he was always playing with her on that subject. She was the recipient of a fantastic love letter, which is in the show, and shown for the first time, and the leaflets of all that notebook. And Dora Maar was a very difficult lady. She answered Picasso very strongly. She fought with him. She influenced him a lot. And she was la femme qui pleure, the crying lady. And thanks to her, as a photographer, as a companion, she filmed all the Guernica stages, you know. A very important woman, very important presence, and an artist in her own right.
And then you come to Dora and the Minotaur.
Well, the Minotaur. Look at Dora. She's looking towards the sky. She is, it's almost in a prayer. She's almost in the atmosphere of a mystical mood. And look at him as the Minotaur. Look at his eyes. It could be the portrait of Dostoevsky, you know. It's, the eyes are, he's beyond himself. And also look at his anatomy. He has no penis. Isn't that strange? So what are they doing? Yeah, they are playing out a drama where the mystical lady and the mythological bull are playing out some kind of Shakespearean tragedy.
Let me shift now to the older years and how all the themes we talk about are reflected there, because it's, you know, his psyche.
Yeah.
I come to this now because it's gotten lots of attention. Some say it's one of the surprising things about this exhibition, the woman pissing.
That's 1965. Directly influenced by...
8 years before his death.
Yes. He was directly influenced by the engraving of Rembrandt, which for the first time has been shown next to the painting. This pissing lady is one of the main characters of his play, Desire Caught by the Tail, which he wrote in 1941. She's laughing, she's having a lot of fun, and she's on the beach. You know that Picasso lived on the Riviera. So you might say it's an autobiographical element.
I also know that I know people that think that was not a good idea for him to go to the south of France because They say he was sort of isolated down there and didn't paint as well as he might have if he'd stayed in Paris.
Well, who are they to tell Picasso where to live? He liked the sun. You know, he was born in Malaga, and he just liked the sunshine. You know, why not live by the sea? I don't see, in the name of what you can tell a guy like Picasso where to live or how to paint.
The point's well taken.
Anyway, she was having a lot of fun peeing on the beach. And there's a recurrent theme in Picasso's work, by the way.
Which is?
The peeing lady.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the things that brings him very near to Duchamp. You know, Duchamp's first work was called Fountain, and it was a urinal.
We did not mention a painting that does not travel, Demoiselle d'Avignon.
Yeah.
It's at the Museum of Modern Art.
Never wants to lend that.
Nobody, for understandable reasons, it's one of the great Picasso paintings.
Definitely.
What you do, though, is very interesting. You show the sketchbook.
Yeah.
As you do in other cases. I mean, what's interesting about this, and let's just talk about this first. You show the sketchbook.
Yeah.
So you see where men were in the scene in some early sketches.
Exactly.
He takes them out.
He takes them out.
And we're not talking about prostitutes, right?
Yeah.
Women.
Yeah. All the great painters did that. From the Italian Renaissance on, they would
put characters in, take them out.
Study all the possibilities of the composition, put people in front or in back, change their position, change the colors, put people in, take people out, just like a movie director would. Well, if you don't see all these notebooks, you don't understand the final painting much. So what we did here is allow the general museum viewing public to see all the documents that only great scholars were allowed to know about, you see. We're sort of democratizing the knowledge
because you can only see the first page, and here you can see the whole thing.
You can travel through Picasso's mind,
Which is extraordinary.
What this exhibition is about.
Then there's Nude 1972. This is 1 year
before his death.
And it shows what?
It shows that perspective is no longer there. Everything is on the first, like a naive painting.
Yeah.
The body is falling apart. He's trying to remember what it was like. The vagina is still there. The eyes are still there. But you never know which is to the forefront.
Why do you have this standing alone?
Because we thought it was the good idea to show that this painter, philosopher, was not scared of death. He was looking death straight in the face. And if the show at the beginning was the origin of the world, the vulva, the cosmic gremb, well, maybe it was a fitting image to end the show, is to show that he was still looking that image straight in the face, and that his life ended on a meditation where, Paul Gauguin said it before Picasso, where do we come from, where are we, and where are we going? Maybe this exhibition attempts to answer those three questions.